So as I mentioned, there's a rather large gulf between George Orwell and his father because Richard the father, he is an Englishman of the 19th century. I said that George Orwell is definitely a person of the 20th century. So, but for Richard, the whole India service was to have a long time job plus a pension. So yes, the standard argument of parents, right? Get a good job, get a good pension, and so he tried to say to his son, you should do this too. So that was very common. People would press their children to go into the same jobs because it was a good paying job and you got a good pension. It was rough. You had to go and live in a lot of areas. You were separated from your family and living amongst the locals. Needless to say, they didn't like you very much. So in India, they were not terribly fond of the British presence, occupation, whatever term you want to use, colonial, usurpers, whatever. I don't. It doesn't really matter. But the point is there was lots of friction. It wasn't necessarily an easy job. Not pleasant for probably anybody except the people making all the money, running this huge drug trade. Now Orwell. So as I said, he's born in 1903. So his father is several years older than him. So there's that gulf in age, and also as a sort of a cultural gulf between the 19th and the 20th century. So 1903, he's born. In for a few years, he's living in India with his parents, and then his mother picks the kids up, right? Off with George and his siblings and mom. They go to England. So his first few years of life are in India. Goes off to England. Richard Blair, dad, he stays in India, visits his family a little bit, but basically works the rest of his career out in, again in this drug trade, and comes home eventually to England and does what most of the British men did. They just came home, they left it all, and came home, and they came back to a decent pension and spent his days, reading a book or two and going for a lot of walks on the seashore, things like that. So a very calm, sedentary lifestyle that they returned to after being involved in something pretty nasty. Now, again, I mentioned that George Orwell had a difficult relationship with both his parents. His mother doesn't seem to come up too much in his writings, but she does. He does say that she encouraged him. She seems to have been an amateur painter and had a love of words and encouraged him. So in the biographies that I've looked at, she doesn't get a lot of press. Maybe she had a lot more because, after all, he's a writer, and he does say that she encouraged me as a youngster to write. So, and there's a little bit of Orwell's writings that have survived, not many, but so from a young age he wanted to be a writer, but he put it aside for a while. So his biography is more complex that we're going to go into, but basically he's always someone who had a love affair with words. I'm going to jump a little bit ahead now. And suffice it to say that he was a decent student, but nothing outstanding. So we don't have records of him, really doing extraordinarily well and publishing great things when he was a kid. Nothing like that. But he was a smart enough little fellow, and he did well. He did win a scholarship to go to what we might call a secondary school, like a high school, a good one. But he didn't do all that well there, and he didn't like it. He was kind of a miserable kid in a lot of these places, and British boarding schools didn't have a great reputation then, and even now some people look at them kind of questioningly. But anyway, so he was good at. People thought that he might go to university, but it didn't work out. And his parents weren't rich enough to send him to university without a good scholarship, and he didn't really make the grade for that, and his parents didn't think he was smart enough. So, well, if you're not going to get a good education, it's off to India for you, says Richard to little George, or little, well, he would have said Eric. You're off to India, Eric, and you're going to work for the company, and you're going to work for the British colonial system. So one thing about George Orwell is, yeah, he was very anti-authoritarianism and all that stuff, but he was involved in it, right, firsthand. And so when we'll have a little look at that. So it's not unusual to see that someone who's involved in the system gets really exposed to it and sees how awful it is, and then rejects it and is a good source for writing on it. And that's exactly what Orwell is. So it explains why he was, needless to say, just obsessed with totalitarianism. He feared it, and of course, what did he see during his time. The rise of the Soviet Union, right? Must have been terrifying. I mean, it's sort of a distant memory now. And again, the rise of Nazi Germany and the Axis powers and all that, something that definitely shaped his life and his mind and his thinking as a writer.